Explicit instruction. Module 5 begins a series of modules on the topic of explicit instruction, which is about modeling and practicing to help students reach important academic goals. To get started, I want to talk about what explicit instruction is and why it's important in this context. This module has many objectives, but I'm going to lay them out for you in a simple way. There are three real areas we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about first, how to select a clear objective. Second, how to model for students. And third, how to practice with students. The definition of explicit instruction is a way of teaching where the teacher first selects an important objective, then specifies exactly what the learning outcome is, designs very carefully structured instructional experience for the students, in which the teacher explains directly, models for the students, and then provides scaffolded practice so they can achieve mastery. So that is exactly what we're going to talk through. This is about the objective, this is about the modeling, and finally this is about the practice. Why use explicit instruction? The rationale for using it is that research has shown time and time again that this way of teaching that we'll describe to you in this module is highly effective. Here are references to several studies that have shown that to be the case. And you can see that's been shown since the 90s, and even from back in the 70s when the first studies of what was called direct instruction, capital D, capital I, was a program sometimes called DISTAR, now called Reading Mastery, that was used to provide instruction to students in reading. It was highly effective in increasing students' reading achievement. Since then, other studies have been done to show that, for example, it works in language arts and mathematics classrooms, that regardless of what the area is, explicit instruction can be very effective for students. And studies have been done on the individual parts of explicit instruction, and those have also been shown on their own to be effective. So when we talk about the explicit instruction model, we're doing this because for many students, including students who have intensive intervention needs, this can be highly effective. So let's talk about this in terms of the database individualization framework. Database individualization is a way of supporting students who have intensive needs in academics and behavior. For our purposes, we're going to talk about academics today, because explicit instruction is used to support students in academic content. Let's talk about it in terms of the framework as it's laid out by the National Center for Intensive Intervention. To start, you have a teacher implementing a secondary prevention program with fidelity. Has to happen. Then the teacher monitors progress, and in this case, the student shows an insufficient response to the program implemented with fidelity. So what do we do then? Well, then we look at some diagnostic data. In this instance, the teacher looks at the data and the student shows some progress. And we here highlight the word some because the student's progress is not great, but it's not zero. Then the teacher looks at the taxonomy of adaptations and decides to do something simple. And a simple thing to do is to increase the dosage for the student. So if the student's making some progress, great, we can increase a little bit dosage. If the student gets more time, maybe that will make the progress go from here to here. In this instance, it doesn't work. Student progress is insufficient. The student is not tracking the aim line. They're not reaching the level we think they should be able to. And so we need to try something different. What do? We go back to the diagnostic assessment. We decide, what can we do? This time, we look at not just the progress monitoring data, we now look at student work samples. The student work samples show some confusion. It's not so much that the students don't understand the concepts at all. It's that the students don't understand exactly what they are intended to do. There's something about the concepts that is confusing them. And if that's the case, that might indicate to us maybe there's something about the kind of instruction we're using. And if we think about changing the instruction, then that is about explicit instruction. And that's the focus of this module, is to talk about how do we use explicit instruction when we realize that the reason students are responding, the reason they're confused, is that our instruction hasn't helped students sufficiently. Explicit instruction works. Explicit instruction can be increased even when we're implementing a secondary prevention program. So if you're implementing a program, you think to yourself, well, doesn't it have explicit instruction built into it? In some cases, it does. But when a secondary prevention program is designed, it does not always have clarity about exactly what it is you're supposed to teach. In some programs, skills get mixed together in ways that make it hard to decide, what am I supposed to do next? In some cases, there aren't clear expectations. What is it that students are supposed to get out of this part of the lesson? The program as a whole has been validated to be effective, but it may be that certain elements of it haven't been designed in that way. Sometimes it's also the case that lessons are just driven by activities and not by objectives. And in those cases, you need to pull apart the lesson and make those decisions. So even when it's not clear what you're supposed to teach and the objectives aren't particularly clear, even if that isn't the case, even if it is clear, a lot of programs don't specify exactly how to teach. They will assume that you know how to use explicit methods to teach this to students, and you may not feel that you do. And also, some programs don't use explicit methods. So you want to think about, for students who need intensive intervention, ways to make instruction more explicit. Some programs are designed in a non-explicit way that can work for some students, but it often doesn't work for students who have intensive needs, as I'll describe in a moment. In cases where you don't have a program, it's even more difficult. In this case, you have to decide what to teach, and that is really hard to do. But along with that, you need to choose the objectives and you need to figure out how to teach them explicitly. And then when you decide how you're going to teach it, you need to design it using explicit instruction framework. So very hard work. But I want to be clear that even if you're using a secondary prevention program and you're implementing with fidelity, that may mean you still need to change the instruction to make it more explicit. So thinking about that explicit instruction model that will work both for a secondary prevention program and when you have to design your own curriculum, which hopefully most of you won't have to do, it all begins with a clear objective that has an important focus, it's critical content for the student, and that has a very specific learning outcome. That sets up the explicit instruction framework, and in order to do explicit instruction well, it needs to be focused on a clear objective. Once you really begin the instruction itself, there are two core components to it. Each of them has its own pieces. First, you have modeling. Modeling involves two things. It involves giving a clear explanation of the key concepts and using planned examples to show students how to do that. Those are two parts of modeling. When then we get to practice, practice involves two different ways of practicing. One is guided and one is independent. And you decide which of those to use based on the lesson concept. This part of modeling practice in these two ways is sometimes known as I do, we do, and you do. We break it into these two components because it is the case that sometimes you'll do guided practice or independent practice without doing both. It may not always be necessary to do all three steps, and so we look at modeling and then practice. Underlying all of this are supporting practices. And supporting practices are ways to support students in mastering this content. So we're going to talk about three of them. We're going to talk about using effective methods to elicit frequent responses. We're going to talk about providing immediate specific feedback. And we're going to talk about maintaining a brisk pace. And those things will occur in future modules. So once we have this in place, it can really support students in learning the content. I want you now to think about this model and why it might be important for students who have intensive intervention needs. To do that, we're going to have you do your first activity as part of this module, which is to read an article. This is part of an article written in 2016 by Martin, and it gives you a feel for why it's important to do this with students who have intensive needs. So you'll read this article, and then in your workbook, there's some reflection questions for you to help you think about the importance of explicit instruction for students. So go ahead and read that article now, and then we'll come back together and we'll talk about it. I hope that you gather from the article a critical idea, which is managing a student's cognitive load. The value of explicit instruction is that you are not overwhelming students with information. That's really critical for students who have intensive intervention needs. I'm going to describe how that works using what is kind of a strange analogy, which I'm just going to do, and you're just going to have to go with it for me. So I'm going to talk about stones. I'm going to talk about a bowl. And so I literally mean stones in a bowl. And in a way, I really kind of mean a variety of bowls. And every bowl, in a way, sort of reflects an individual person. And people have all kinds of different bowls. And the bowl reflects the sort of container in which we can place knowledge. And these containers can differ in a lot of ways. And one way in which they can differ is the size of the opening at the top. And we'll call this a bowl. Really, it's a vase. But the idea here is that some students have a wide bowl, a lot of ways to get information into their brains, and some students have a sort of narrow neck bowl, meaning fewer ways to get information into their brains. We can think about this in terms of students who have intensive intervention needs. in a way, students who need intensive intervention are somehow like these students here. Or no, this is not a student, this is a vase. The students who need intensive intervention are sort of in a way like this vase, meaning that it is harder to get information into their brains. Students who have typical achievement, it can be much easier for them to get information in their brains because the bowl is wide, and so it's easy to put information into it. What's important to understand, though, is the capacity of the container is not really different. You put a lot of things in here and a lot of things in here. And we're going to talk about things as stones. And by stones, we mean those are kind of aspects of knowledge. The trick here is that for these students, the cognitive load, for students who need intensive intervention, the cognitive load tends to be higher. And as a result of having a high cognitive load, it is harder for students who need intensive intervention to process the lesson content. And so what we're going to do with explicit instruction is to help students. So we use this, I use this analogy to think about how to help students acquire knowledge depending on those conditions. So one way of instructing students would be to take those stones, the information you want to transmit, the knowledge, and to sort of lob them at the bowl in a way, to sort of throw a handful in that direction. And I mean that in a purposeful way. Teachers sometimes create a context in which students are asked to sort of figure things out for themselves. And that way we're sort of not giving them specificity, we're sort of giving them some general concepts, and then they put it together. And that's an instructional method. And that results for most people in stones in the bowl. So that instructional approach is effective in many cases. But for students who have intensive intervention needs, getting information into their heads in this way often results in stones everywhere. And that shows us that the instructional approach is not effective for those students. So what do we do instead when students have intensive needs? Instead of sort of lobbing the rocks at the bowl because they have this cognitive load issue that makes it harder for them to get information to their brains, what do? We are going to take those stones and very carefully place them in the bowl. And the result is that we have a very pretty bowl full of stones. Ultimately, it can turn into a cairn of knowledge. A cairn is a rock outpost that's used on mountain trails to make sure people don't get lost in the winter. But it's also just a beautiful stack of things. In this sense, we can think of a cairn of knowledge as a stack of ideas. Now, we can help students build a beautiful tower of stones by teaching them very carefully, one at a time, using explicit instruction. So that concludes my very odd analogy. But there are questions about that are written into your workbook to help you process the ideas that I just described. So why is it that these are the ideas we use to describe explicit instruction for students, and how the way we're talking about instructing differs from the way we might instruct all kinds of different students? So go ahead and stop and jot in your workbook, summarize what we just discussed, and we'll go from there. Okay. Hopefully you paused the video, had a chance to reflect on the analogy. And now let's talk about building your representation of explicit instruction going forward. So what I'm going to have you do here is I'm going to have you watch a video in two parts. In this lesson, you see two folks here. One of them is me. One of them is a colleague of mine, Sarah Powell from the University of Texas. And Sarah and I are going to model for you the explicit instruction process, doing something, cutting onions, okay? Which seems like a very simple task and is something, frankly, I do know how to do. It's important to note because it doesn't look like this in this example. The objective is to cut onions to use them for cooking for a specific purpose, which is, in this case, to make guacamole. And what happens in this lesson, in this case, is to begin, I cut the onions on my own. And so, in this first part, you're going to watch, you can see me cutting the onions on my own.
I think that we should make some guacamole tonight. That's a very Austin thing to make.
Tex-Mex.
But I have everything except the avocado. So I'm going to run to the store real quick.
Yep.
And while I'm gone, could you chop one of these onions for the guac?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. All right, cool.
All right.
Thanks so much, bud.
All right, y'all, see you back.
Bye.
All right, thanks. Chopping onions, no problem.
Okay, so nice. 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 Okay, that one seems pretty good. What about that one? This one, these are kind of the same. I'm pretty sure you don't use the saw. Okay, oh, should I take that around? Okay, let's try that. Okay. I've done this before. I don't know. I know that's strong. Check. It's really supposed to end up. let me try again. Different. Alright, this is what's terrible. This one's gotta work, right? So, okay, okay, this one's Let's go to number 5. Here we go.
Hey, Devin.
Sarah. Hi, Sarah. How you doing? So, so there were some onion-related challenges. I'm a little bit upset about it, but this is the onion crunch.
Devin, have you ever chopped an onion before?
Well, yeah, Sarah. I don't cook that.
Okay, well, you know what I think you need?
What's that, Sarah?
I think that you need some explicit instruction.
I think you're right.
So you saw the video. I apologize. It was, we just thought it'd be fun, right? So I hope that you didn't mind the silliness of it. But so I had an objective there. I tried to cut the onions on my own. I did a disastrous job of cutting the onions on my own. And so now we realize I need explicit instruction. And I need explicit instruction because I'm not getting it. There are things about that I'm not understanding. And so Sarah is going to provide that explicit instruction by using the explicit instruction model that I've already described to you. So now you're going to have an opportunity to watch a second video. This is a video of Sarah now showing me how to do it. For this, we're going to have you complete an activity. You're going to look at how Sarah models, how she does guided practice with me, and how she does independent practice. And you'll see there the roles that I play and the roles that Sarah plays. And I want you to note what are the roles that you see each of us playing throughout the lesson. My task here isn't to tell you more about it. So I'm not going to review this with you when we're finished. Why do that? Because my goal right now is to give you a representation of practice. Writing things down will help you process the information, but my goal is for you to understand, have a vision for what it could look like to do explicit instruction, not to describe the parts to you now, because that's the rest of this entire module. That's a toy example, so I want you to pause here, watch the parts of the video where we talk about the actual instruction, then we'll come back together, and I'm going to give you a second example to allow you to process real content. So, good luck watching the video. I promise the rest of it is not as silly.
All right, Devin, are you ready to learn how to cut an onion?
I'm excited.
All right, so I'm going to use explicit instruction to kind of show you how to do this. So first I'm going to do some modeling, and I'm going to use these steps, all right? So let's review them before we get started. So first, here's my onion.
Yep.
All right, what do I have?
An onion.
All right, so first thing we're going to do is peel the onion, which means we're going to take all that brown stuff off, all right? Then we're going to slice it in half from end to end. Now, an onion, I don't know if that's exactly what they're called, but I consider this an end and that an end. So where are the two ends right there?
Those are the ends.
Very good. So we're going to slice it in half from end to end.
Okay.
Then we're going to cut off one of those ends.
Great.
All right. So we have to always remember about our ends. Then we're going to slice the grains to the middle. So look at this onion. Look how it has these different grains in it. It's kind of like a big little pumpkin.
Yeah.
We're going to slice in those grains all the way to the core or the middle of the onion.
Okay.
And then we're going to chop it. All right. So help me out with this. First, I'm going to choose a knife. My favorite knife is not here, so I'm going to use this knife.
Okay.
All right. Bigger the better. Okay. And what's the first one?
Except that one.
Yeah, that one is like, well, that's a bread knife.
Oh,
All right, so we're gonna
bread.
Yeah, that's why it's serrated. All right, so what's the first thing that we're gonna do?
Bread.
All right, so I don't need this. So we're gonna take this onion, and what do I need to peel off of here?
The outside, I guess the brown layer?
Yeah, the brown layer, because I don't really want to eat the brown layer of the onion.
I don't need guacamole with the brown layer.
Yeah, it's just not how anybody does it really. Yeah, so get all that brown stuff off of there, and that one peels pretty well. All right, got a little bit of just brown on the skin of that, but you see how that's going to be okay to use. Okay. All right. So what's the second thing that we're going to do here?
Slice in half from end to end.
Now remind me again, what are the ends?
Those are the ends.
Those are the ends. So I'm going to take out my knife, and now when I'm holding this onion, whenever I'm going to use what I call the claw, okay? Because if I have my fingers all like that, that could be bad news.
That
So
would
the
be bad
claw is gonna like keep my fingers in from getting cut by the knife. So
Okay.
I'm gonna claw the onion and cut from end to end, just like this. Okay, all right, so what did I do? I sliced it in.
From end to end.
Yeah, I sliced it right in, and now they're in half, okay? I'm gonna worry about that half later. I'm gonna focus on this half right now.
Okay.
Now I'm gonna cut off what?
One end.
One end. So it doesn't really matter which end you choose. I'm gonna just do this one. Just cut it off, put it over here. We don't need that anymore. So what's the fourth thing that we're gonna do?
We're gonna slice grains to middle.
That's right. So the grains are these things here. Can you
Yep.
really touch and feel those grains?
Yep.
All
Okay,
right.
totally get it.
Yeah.
It's like a
So
pumpkin stuff.
we're gonna, yeah, it's exactly like a little pumpkin. So we're gonna take those grains and I'm gonna take my knife and just go all the way to the very middle of the onion, just like this. Okay. And if they pop out a little bit, that's okay. We're gonna come back to those in just a minute. I'm gonna just turn it around so I can cut the grains on this side of the onion. All right. Now I don't cut off the end yet because the end is holding all of those grains together, just
Okay.
like that. All right. And now we're almost finished. The last thing we have to do is what?
Chop.
Chop. So I'm going to turn my onion, do my claw again, and now I'm just going to chop just like this in pretty just even sized pieces. And then all of these pieces of the onion that are going to go into our guacamole are even and going to be nice and delicious to eat. And then I don't really need that part of the onion, so I just toss it aside.
Great.
All right, you ready to practice?
I'm ready to
Do one
practice.
with me?
Yeah.
Okay.
that
All
sounds
right.
great.
Sounds great.
All right.
All right, Devin, so now we're going to chop an onion together, all right? We're going to do some, what I like to call guided practice, okay?
Okay,
So we're
sure.
going to go back to our steps.
Okay.
So let's remember, what are we going to do first?
Peel it.
And
Yep.
you know, I actually already made this easy. I peeled the onion for us, okay? Then what are we going to do?
Slice in half from end to
And
end.
where are the ends on the onion?
Those are the ends.
Very good. Then we're going to cut off
One end.
one of those, and then we're going to slice the grains.
Mhm.
And then what do we do?
Chop.
Chop. Okay, so I've got a cutting board, you've got a cutting board, and you're going to do the first part of this. So we've
Okay.
already peeled it. So number 2, we're going to slice in half from end to end. I'll let you use my favorite knife, and I'll use the little
Okay.
knife here.
Great.
All right. So if I'm going to slice it from end to end, you got to get your claw out.
Okay, claw out.
Claw
Mhm.
out. Hold your onion and get it so it's the knife can go from end to end. And
Okay.
you're not just going to go straight down the middle of the onion. That was very good.
Thanks,
nice
Sarah.
work. I like how you chop that from end to end. All right, now we're going to cut off one end. So I'm going to use this half of the onion, use that half of the onion.
Okay.
Which end are you going to cut off?
I'll cut off this one.
All right, I'll cut off that one too.
Okay.
All right, get those there. Just gonna throw it aside, throw it off the cutting board. We don't need that anymore. Okay.
Yep.
Now this is where it really gets really fun. Now we're gonna slice the greens. So what greens are we gonna slice?
We're gonna go along this way. Like
Yeah.
the pumpkin thing.
The pumpkin lines. All right. So go ahead and turn. Again, kind of get it to a place that.
Like this.
Very good. That's nice.
Okay.
All right. Now slice those greens
Okay.
all the way to the middle. Okay. Very good. Nice. Okay. Maybe just a little bit gentler. That's nice. Okay. And then once you get about to the top, this is when I always like to kind of put that slice back in there. Just turn it around
Okay.
so that it'll be easier to cut the grains going this
Okay.
way.
Cool.
Okay.
Yep.
I'll do mine too. Alright. Wow, Devin, that's nice. You really sliced those grains very nicely.
Thank you.
Alright, so now I always like to turn my onion, and you're left-handed, right?
Yep, I turn it that way.
So you'll turn it this way, kind of hold that in, get your claw out there just like
Okay.
that,
Yep.
okay? And now you'll just do very little, maybe like a 1/4-inch cuts all the way to the other end that's holding all of the onion together. Ooh, very good. Nice spacing there. Great. All right, and then just take that in part there. We'll just toss that aside.
Okay.
And then look what you've done. You've created all these little onion pieces. Those are gonna be
Okay,
so
cool.
delicious in our guacamole.
Cool.
Nice work.
It has still some ends though, and I feel like mine fell apart a little bit more. than
Well, you
yours.
know, it takes a little bit of practice. So what we could do with those ends, well, look what I have here. Mine's kind of like chalk, like all put together. So I might just put that to the side. So you could either put them aside, or you could get those out and just do your claw again. Is it okay if I do this?
Yeah, you do
one for
it. Sure.
And then just like do like little cuts just like this, so that's the same size. Okay? So we
Okay.
can problem solve there and figure that one out. So that
Okay.
looks really nice. That was a very good first effort.
Thanks.
Good job. All right, Dee. So we've talked a lot about chopping this onion, and I have this half, and I want you to like show me if you can do this. So then I know next time I leave, you're going to be okay on your
I would like to be better.
Yeah, that would
yes.
be better. All right, so it's already peeled. So we already peeled it, and
Yep.
then what was the other thing that we already did?
We sliced it from end to end.
Sliced it from the end to end. So you're going to pick up here with step number 3.
Okay.
All right.
Yep.
And so I'm going to let you have this on your cutting board, and
Okay.
you know you can use either of these knives. Since this is a small onion, you might want to use this smaller knife.
Okay, sure. Yeah.
So the first thing you're going to do is do what? You're going to
Cut off one end. So
Okay.
there's one end.
Mhm.
I cut it off.
Very nice. I like how you put that to the side so we don't get that mixed up in our guacamole onion.
Yep.
Now what are you going to do?
I'm gonna slice the grains to the middle. I can do it this way, is that okay?
Yeah, either way.
And I don't go all the way through, right?
Yeah, just gonna go all, yeah, don't cut all the way that end off because that's what's holding all the onion
Hold it
pieces together.
Okay. And that's the middle.
And then just turn it around and do it from the same thing on the other
Oh,
side.
actually, it's easier for me to do it that way, so I'll do it this way.
Yeah, you kind of have to figure out what
The
works
way it
best
works
for
for
you.
you, okay.
Yeah. Your knife positioning is good.
Oh, I didn't
like
claw
that.
it
Yeah,
enough.
make sure you got your claw
Yeah,
up there.
thanks. That's good.
You don't
Okay.
want a hospital visit.
No.
No.
We almost had one earlier.
Almost. And then the last thing you're gonna do is chop it. And just don't go chop it, but how are you gonna chop it?
I'm gonna chop it like this way to the end,
to the
right?
end, like methodically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ah, no, just kidding.
No.
Just kidding, sorry.
Nice. Very even cuts.
Got my claw.
Yeah. That's good, Devin. You're very improved in your onion cutting. Nice,
Wow.
very nice. I'm just
Yeah.
gonna toss that to the side.
Okay.
And this is going to be delicious. in
Oh
our
wow, that looks
guacamole.
really good.
I know, doesn't
Not
it?
quite as
though?
good as yours, but I mean, I'm
You know
closer.
what? It's a team effort. We're working on this together, and I think the more that you chop onions, the better you're going to get at it.
That's
It's this
awesome.
whole idea of practice.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Thanks,
good
Sarah. That was
job.
really helpful.
Okay, so I hope you enjoyed the video of me and Sarah doing that together. And you could see the three phases modeling. You could see the three phases of modeling, guided practice, and independent practice. And you saw me using some supporting practices, Sarah using some supporting practices as well. Now let's turn to a different example. This is a real classroom example, and this is from Dr. Anita Archer, who is co-author of a well-known book called Explicit Instruction, written with Charles Hughes. And this example allows us to see an example of how the explicit instruction framework can be used in a very brief way. So in this case, Dr. Archer's objective is for students to use a response format. She's not taught them before. And it's a quick video of her showing students how to do this. So in this video then, you're going to see a short but complete cycle of explicit instruction that includes the three parts I described: modeling, then practice, both guided and independent, and then the use of the supporting practices. For this one, we've done a lot of the work for you to understand the different parts of it. Here, what I want you to do is to notice that there are very simple models here, and then lots of different kinds of practice with one extra model in the middle. Okay? And the model here is going to take the form mostly of an explanation. We've written here what Dr. Archer says. I want you to observe what is it that the students do in response to what Dr. Archer says. So you again can get a representation of the use of the explicit instruction framework. My task, again, is not to describe all the pieces to you. It's to give you a mental model for what explicit instruction could look like, and we'll learn more about all these pieces as we go through the module.
You're ready? You're ready? You're ready? Hang out one more time. And 1, 2, 3, ready? You're perfect. You're perfect. Excellent. Now, here's something I do that may be a little bit different than your teacher, and that is when I ask a question, students in my class don't raise their hands. So when I ask a question, are you going to raise your hands? Yes or no, everyone? No. Unless I say, raise your hand. So everybody, raise your hand. Then you can do that. But here's what we're going to do instead. When the answers are very short, we're going to say the answers together. I'll ask a question. I will put up my hands. This says think, do not blurt. And when I lower my hands right there, you'll say the answer. Got it? Okay, ooh, good job sitting up. So get ready. So everybody, what day of the week is it? Everyone, it's?
November.
The day of the week is Friday. Oh, I can't believe you'd forget that. Let's try it again. So what day of the week is it? Think?
Friday.
Think? Everyone. Friday. Now let's practice that again. This is think. You don't say it until I lower my hands right there. Okay? So what day of the week is it, everybody? It's?
Friday.
All right. Of course, tomorrow it will be?
Saturday.
I didn't fool you. After Saturday?
Sunday.
Perfect. That gives everybody a chance to think. You are so good.
The module activities include many different things. You find in many of our modules, you'll see there are going to be videos for you to watch and to reflect on. There are going to be workbook activities where you write things in your workbook. There'll also be opportunities for you to use guided notes. You've already done the reading, so good job. That's from the Martin article that we already read part of. Sometimes you'll see lead teacher demonstrations. We'll have teachers who might include me, who might include other teachers who I work with. And we're going to do toy examples where we're going to actually pretend to be a teacher, and we're going to show you good and bad practice. We also provide examples of real curricula, which we've anonymized to protect the publishers. But we are using those to illustrate good and bad practice. We have quizzes built into this module. There'll be opportunities for you to use a discussion board. And then the last part, the exciting part, is preparing to do a classroom application, and then you doing a classroom application in which you teach explicitly. And let me describe that to you now. So you're going to execute a lesson. You're going to design a lesson that you're going to teach using a checklist that we'll give you for how to teach an explicit instruction lesson. And in the journal, you're going to write, to prepare for that, the learning outcome, using the format we describe in this module. Describe how it aligns with the student goals, how it matches student needs. Then create the clear explanation of the content and a description of the practice activities and why you chose that kind of practice. That then will lead to you executing a beautiful lesson. So this is where we're headed. We're going to support you in getting there. In the same way that we help students get to where we want to go, we're going to do the same thing for you. We don't expect you to understand this yet. We'll get there by the end of the module. So welcome to Module 5. Here we go with explicit instruction. We hope you'll enjoy it.